She worked hard. She woke up early. She went to bed exhausted. And still, she never had money. No matter how much effort she put in, the end of the month always arrived with the same fear. Nothing left. Bills on the table, a knot in her chest, that quiet shame of asking herself where it all went. She believed saving money was something for other people, people who earned more, people with luck, people with an easier life. But she was wrong. Her life didn't change because her income increased. It didn't change because someone rescued her. It changed the day she learned a rule so small it sounded ridiculous, a rule most people ignore because it feels too little to matter. And yet that rule slowly gave her control, dignity, and peace. Before we continue, like and subscribe. It helps this story reach people who feel stuck but don't know why. Now, stay with the full story. Her name was Rachel Miller. Rachel lived in a small town in the Midwest, the kind of place where people worked hard, smiled politely, and rarely talked about money struggles out loud. She was in her early 30s and worked long hours doing whatever work she could find, cleaning houses, helping at a local diner, sewing repairs for neighbors when they asked. From the outside, Rachel looked responsible. She never missed a day of work, she didn't waste money on big things, she didn't live beyond her means. And yet, she was always broke. Every paycheck came with a plan. Before the money even touched her hands, it already belonged to someone else. Rent, groceries, medicine, gas, small things that added up faster than she could track. By the third week of every month, her stomach tightened. She knew the pattern well. She knew the fear of standing in line at the store, calculating silently. She knew the humiliation of saying, "I'll come back later," when she didn't have enough. Rachel didn't understand where she was failing. She wasn't careless, she wasn't lazy, she wasn't irresponsible. She was unaware. Her days were full of tiny decisions she barely noticed. A coffee here because she felt exhausted. A small gift there because she didn't want to disappoint someone. A few dollars given away because saying no felt worse than the loss. Each choice felt harmless. Together, they were draining her life. At night, Rachel sat at the edge of her bed and replayed the month in her head. She tried to remember what she bought, what she spent, what she could have avoided, but everything blurred together. Money felt like water slipping through her fingers. She didn't dream of luxury. She dreamed of breathing, of opening a drawer and knowing there was something saved, of facing an emergency without panic, of sleeping without fear pressing on her chest. She told herself the same thing every month. When I earn more, then I'll save. But deep down, she wondered if that day would ever come. She didn't know it yet, but Rachel wasn't missing money. She was missing direction.
Rachel's breaking point didn't come with a disaster. There was no eviction notice, no medical emergency, no dramatic argument. It came quietly. One afternoon, she stood in her kitchen holding a grocery receipt. She stared at the numbers, confused. The total wasn't high. She hadn't bought anything special, and yet her wallet was empty again. She sat down at the small table and felt the familiar wave rise in her chest. What am I doing wrong? That question had haunted her for years. That same week, she ran into Mrs. Caldwell, an older woman in town known for living simply but never struggling. She wasn't rich, she didn't show off, but she was calm in a way Rachel envied. When Mrs. Caldwell asked how she was doing, Rachel surprised herself. She told the truth. "I work all the time," Rachel said softly, "but I can't save a single dollar. It's like my money disappears." Mrs. Caldwell listened without interrupting. Then she asked something unexpected. "Do you know exactly where your money goes?" Rachel opened her mouth to answer and stopped. She thought she knew. She had excuses, she had explanations, but she didn't have clarity. That was the invisible problem. Rachel didn't lack discipline, she lacked awareness. Money wasn't leaving her life in big chunks. It was leaking out in tiny, almost invisible ways. Small comforts, small generosity, small decisions made to avoid discomfort. And because they were small, she never questioned them. Mrs. Caldwell invited her over for coffee the next day. The house was modest, clean, quiet, nothing fancy, but everything had its place. They sat at the table, and Mrs. Caldwell placed a small glass jar between them. "This," she said, "is where my life changed." Rachel smiled politely, confused. "I never learned to save by earning more. I learned to save by paying attention." Then she explained the rule that would shake Rachel's thinking. "Every time money touches your hand," she said, "you separate a small part, just 1%. Rachel almost laughed. 1%? She repeated. "That's nothing." Mrs. Caldwell nodded. "That's why it works."
Mrs. Caldwell leaned back in her chair and folded her hands calmly. "The 1% rule isn't about the amount," she said. "It's about who's in control." Rachel frowned. 1% felt almost insulting. She was struggling to cover basics. How could something so small possibly matter? Mrs. Caldwell seemed to read her thoughts. "When you try to save big amounts," she continued, "fear takes over. You feel deprived. You quit. But when you save 1%, your brain doesn't panic. It cooperates." She explained it simply. Every time Rachel received money, cash, tips, a paycheck, anything, she would immediately separate 1%. No excuses, no negotiations, no "I'll do it later." That money wasn't to be touched. Not for emergencies, not for kindness, not for guilt. "It's not an emergency fund," Mrs. Caldwell said. "It's a discipline fund." Rachel laughed nervously. "It sounds too easy." "It sounds easy because it's small," Mrs. Caldwell replied, "but consistency is never easy." She placed a small empty jar on the table and slid it toward Rachel. "This jar won't change your life because of what goes into it," she said. "It will change your life because of what it makes you see." Rachel didn't fully understand, but she agreed to try. The next morning, she earned a few dollars helping a neighbor. When she got home, she hesitated, then placed a single coin into a small container she found in her kitchen. The sound was barely noticeable. Clink. It felt silly, almost embarrassing, but something strange happened. For the first time, Rachel paused before spending the rest. That pause mattered. The second day, she did it again, then the third, then the fourth. The jar stayed almost empty, but her awareness didn't. She started noticing patterns she had never seen before. How often she spent money to avoid discomfort. How generosity sometimes came from guilt, not abundance. How impulse purchases weren't about need, but emotion. The 1% didn't restrict her, it revealed her. And that was the beginning of change. The jar didn't fill quickly. Weeks passed, and the amount inside was still small, almost unimpressive. But Rachel noticed something far more important than the money itself. She felt different. Before, money arrived and disappeared without resistance. Now, every time she separated the 1%, she became present. She stopped spending on autopilot. She began asking questions she had never asked before. Do I really need this right now? Is this solving a problem or avoiding a feeling? The answers weren't always comfortable. Rachel realized how often she used small purchases as emotional relief. A snack when she felt lonely, a little gift when she felt guilty, a convenience expense when she felt tired. None of these choices were wrong by themselves, but together they had been shaping her life. She also began writing things down, not perfectly, not beautifully, just honestly. What came in, what went out, where she felt weak, where she felt proud. It wasn't a budget, it was a mirror. One evening, an unexpected expense appeared.
something minor but enough to cause the familiar panic. Rachel felt her chest tighten, then remembered the jar. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to borrow. She didn't have to apologize. She didn't have to explain. The amount was small, but the feeling was enormous. Dignity. That moment changed how she carried herself. She spoke differently, walked differently, said no when she needed to, gave only when she could. The jar slowly became 2 jars, then a small envelope, not because someone told her to, but because the habit had rewired her thinking. Rachel wasn't saving more because she earned more. She was earning clarity because she had learned to pause. And that pause was power. Rachel never became rich. She didn't win the lottery. She didn't double her income overnight. Nothing dramatic happened. And yet her life changed. She slept better because fear no longer followed her to bed. She made decisions with intention instead of panic. She stopped blaming herself and started trusting herself. The 1% rule didn't give her money first. It gave her clarity. She finally understood something most people never learn. Money doesn't disappear. It obeys attention. When you ignore it, it leaves quietly. When you respect it, it stays. By learning to care for a small amount, Rachel taught herself how to care for larger ones. Not someday, not when things were easier, but exactly where she was. The moral is simple. If you can't manage a little, you won't manage a lot. Saving isn't about income, it's about awareness. And awareness starts with one small decision, repeated daily. If you've been waiting to earn more before you change, don't. Start with what you have. Respect the little, and watch how your life slowly reorganizes itself. Write in the comments, "I start today." Subscribe to Remember This Advice for more stories about money, habits, and quiet transformations. Sometimes the smallest rule carries the biggest change.